Welcome to Tea Practice today, y'alls. Friends, family, tea family, friends, tea lovers, platonic tea connections. Welcome to today's tea practice. It's been a little bit since we've done an experiment, and I'm realizing I'm really, really excited. You know, like we did 40 days straight of this stuff, and then you take me away from it, and then now I'm like, oh my god, experiment time. Today we're going to be doing an experiment with one tea that I received from Joe, Fish Anywhere, who's actually here already. And when I first tried it, I was like, wow, this is a really, really good tea. But there's an interesting aroma going on to it. I wonder if I can somehow affect the tea by putting it in something else. Porcelain jar. So it's been a couple months now since I've done this. And I haven't tasted the results of this experiment, so this will be the first time we crack into it today. And I'm really excited that we get to do this together. So yeah, I'm always excited, but I'm extra excited. You know, it's like Christmas. Tea experiments are like Christmas to me. So, Merry Christmas. Welcome to Tea Practice today, my friends. Lion is here, Joe Fish Anywhere is here, who we have to thank for this tea. It's a sugar white from Leafy Green Tea in his neighborhood over on the East Coast. Joseph is here as well. Celia, it's nice to see you. So-yeon, Jeremy, nice to see you. Calf's Mag, Asulite, and yeah, Steven, it's so nice to see you today. You know, when Instagram pops up and says checking connection before we go live, I look at Steven just to check our connection. Our connection's okay. So, yeah, basically we're going to take these two batches. This came in as part of the same bag. And yeah, I wanted to see if keeping the leaves in this bag versus transferring some of them to the porcelain jar we have here will change the taste of the tea, the aroma, anything, whatever, right? I think the first thing we got to talk about is this, you know, Ziploc bag situation. I know some of you are allergic to anything that comes in a Ziploc bag. I totally understand. But sometimes the best teas have arrived to me in Ziploc bags. And while it's not the most ideal storage for a tea, there's more we had to complain about if a tea is just bad. So just because something arrives in a Ziploc bag, especially from an upstanding guy like Joe, don't discount it. I've heard stories of people who will send tea in a Ziploc bag to someone that's really, really, really special. And then the person's like, oh, it's in a Ziploc. It can't possibly be what you're telling me it is, right? Because if you cared enough, you wouldn't send it in a Ziploc. What did I send us tea back home in? We did like a harvest of like wild, semi-wild trees in Taiwan, super small batch during our Taiwan tea tour in autumn. And guess what my teacher packed them in? Like really tiny, like cute Ziploc Taiwanese bags. So that's not what we're trying to suss out today. What we're trying to suss out is just general storage. Does it actually make a difference that we put it in a porcelain jar? We also have, you know, the Ziploc Mylar bags, but our focus today is if the porcelain itself will make a difference for resting the tea, okay? And maybe we should kind of separate the terms storage and resting. On the Instagram Live, I talked about it being a storage experiment. But because it's only been a couple months now, I think more accurately we can call this resting. We're resting the leaves in a jar, not for long-term storage, but more so that we can try to kind of influence the way that tea might taste when you brew it up later on. This is something I learned from Stefan at Tea Masters, and something that's done quite often in Taiwan is that after they take the tea out of a Ziploc bag or a Mylar bag like this, they'll put it inside a porcelain canister to let the tea breathe and just say like, hey, I'm in a new place. I'm out of my cocoon. Let me get ready for it. You can kind of think of it like, you know, if you wake up in the morning and then you are sent straight to work at the office and the lights are blaring and you got to perform, that's kind of what we're asking the tea to do when we take it out of the bag and then we're just dumping it and then we're going to put boiling water over it. It's kind of a roller coaster. So in theory, allowing the tea to rest in a porcelain jar, not just for aging, okay, but just to get it ready for the brewing process, should change the way it tastes once you brew it. You know, the oxygen is getting to interact with the tea. It lives in this little like microclimate within the jar. And compared to even like a bag like this, it's just a different environment. It's a different material. You know, it's a small space. I've left no air or like not a lot of extra space. So it's just different. Do I know how? Not exactly. But can we taste? Absolutely. So that's what we're gonna do today. Questions, concerns, objections. You have the little Ziploc bag that I gave us. I don't even know where it is.
I don't know where it is.
Yeah, but we get so many, like, once you guys go to like the Origin, if any of you have been to Origin before, and then you're standing in like a wee Tea Masters warehouse, and all of their teas, expensive $1 teas, are in like plastic bags, it kind of changes your mind a little bit. Yeah, there it is.
It's a different tea though.
This is very important tea. This is actually 2002 Elan in a little plastic container. This is what
which was aged in
my
plastic
teacher
bags,
yeah,
so.
it was aged in plastic bags and then stored in a Ziploc bag for me to take back with me. So yeah. So I'm just saying, Joe, while we do like these bags a little bit better, it's really not the end of the world that it comes in a Ziploc bag. It really is not. Okay, so let us weigh this out. To do this experiment, you guys are familiar with the bowl brewing method. For those of you who are not, this is the way that we like to side-by-side things in Taiwan and in the tea world. You know, instead of getting two identical gaiwans with the same shape, same size, same volume, same material, you just get bowls. And we're going to weigh out these guys, get them equal quantities, and the bowls are identical, so, you know, they do the job for us of making sure the volume is about the same. Because if you're doing experiments at home, if you have two different cups, two different gaiwans that you brew it in, even if you're brewing the tea in the exact same way, it's going to come out different because of the material. Yeah? So let's preheat these before we start. Soup spoon is there for us to kind of like interact with the leaves better, taste better. Yeah. And then while we're setting this up, let me know what you guys are drinking today. So far we've had some Jade Mountain. Is that Jade Mountain? I don't even know what it was, but I figured it was Jade Mountain.
You know what it is.
Sometimes I don't know, okay? I mean, I've been tricked before, so yeah, we've had Jade Mountain, High Mountain Oolong. Yeah. In a bowl. We're not always doing experiments all day, every day, which is why we get to do this with you guys. We will weigh this out. This is a pretty, you know, fluffy tea. It's called Sugar White. It's from Leafy Green. It's an interesting one. It's a Dongding area white tea made from, you know, soft stem oolong cultivar there. Closest thing you can think of is it's kind of like Qingshin. Long story there, but you know, it's the cultivar that's most often used to make like High Mountain Oolong, Baozhong Oolong. Most of the oolongs you see from Taiwan will typically be this cultivar unless they say on the label it's Jinshuan or something else. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we'll weigh it out to 1 gram. You didn't think that was just 1 gram, right? But it's really, really fluffy tea. And yeah, Taiwanese white tea in itself is not very common. So I was really happy to get this. I really like Taiwanese teas in general, but Taiwanese white teas are really difficult to get. I've fallen in love with a couple of them. I think my favorite so far has been a Taiwanese Jinshuan, and I really like this as well. I know China has a lot of white teas, but Taiwan just never, you know, never picked up on it. Mostly because the people who first came to Taiwan from China were people from oolong producing areas, so they took their oolong bias with them, you know? Okay, just weighing these out. And I didn't say hello to a couple of you guys who popped in, but I owe you guys a hello. I tend to do that, don't I? Leaves in Hot Water is here. 23 Axolotl. Mel is here. Hi Mel. Paparoncini. Demi International. Yeah, all our friends are over here already. I'm so excited. I'm like a little bit impatient trying to get these leaves out. They've been like living a little bit too comfortably in here. I'm trying not to break too many of them. I already dropped a couple leaves. I'm trying to make sure I'm not breaking them too much because the sample we had on the left is or your guys' is, yeah, it is left, yeah. Your guys' is left is relatively unbroken, so I'm going to make sure that they look about the same. If you're doing side-by-sides like this, make sure that if you're doing, weighing out the material, you're also making sure that, they have about equal amounts broken and non-broken leaves. I think this looks pretty good. Yeah. Yeah, there we go. I'm gonna break one just to get to 100. Okay, 100 even. 1 gram each. Already, they look kind of different. Is it just me? But this one looks a little bit darker than this one. Yeah. Can you see? I think you can kind of see the slight shift in color. This is just a tiny bit more olive green. This one is a little bit more dark. Yeah, even looking through the bag, yeah, it's a little bit more olive green inside. And that might be because of the light exposure that these guys have gone through. But I've learned that in it of itself, exposure to light is not necessarily a problem if the tea can hold itself down. Again, I've seen people age tea in Taiwan in translucent plastic bags, and I'm like, oh my god, you need to put that in an opaque bag. But of course I don't, because you're not going to tell a tea master what to do. And the tea actually tastes really good, so we'll just see what the teas tell us, Over time I've learned that even the most basic tea sayings, oh, never do this, don't do that, XYZ is wrong when you do tea, even the most basic shit, eventually I'll come across someone who just does the wrong thing, and it's great. So I'm like, I'm not convinced that there's any one thing that's always true about tea. Given that, that's probably not true either, right? There's probably something that is always true about tea. What's always true is that we will always love tea. That's the only thing. Yeah. Jeremy's having some Excel spreadsheet. That's a weird sounding tea. Very modern. Joseph's having some yabao. And Joe is saying it's Ranzi. Yes, this is called Ranzi, the cultivar. It's Ruanzhi. Yeah, we can talk about that a different time. It's very close to Qingxin, even if it's not exactly the same. They're very closely related. And you guys will see the word Qingxin a lot more in the market. Yeah. It's yeah. I don't want to talk too much about that stuff because facts get thrown around a lot, and that takes a different kind of setup to get into. But you guys know this is basically your classic Taiwanese oolong plant, but they made it into white tea. Yeah? Alright, let's smell them. Smells nice. Wow, they smell different! What the heck? This actually smells sweeter. This one smells... What? There's no way. This one's sweeter. So the left one is our original packaging. And then the one on the right is our porcelain packaging. It smells different. The one on the left actually smells sweeter. And then this one smells more muted to me. It's interesting. Because I actually have used this technique to try to rest tea before a really important brewing event, or if I really want to make a tea shine. When it's oolong, I know how this storage method has affected my oolong teas. And it tends to make the tea more sweet, more aromatic, kind of almost candy-like. But in this case, at least for the smell, I like the smell of the original packaging better. Right, Stephen? Agree? Disagree? Yeah. Then we'll hit this with near boiling water. Just going to check to see if this is the right temperature. No, it's dropped down in temperature, so we'll bring it back up. But yeah. Friday doing tea experiments. Living the life. We also have a couple others here that Stephen brought out that we're waiting to do experiments with. We haven't figured out what to fill this with. This is a wood fire jar that we got in Korea, not Korea, Jesus, from Taiwan. We've been talking about Korea a lot. It's from Taiwan as well. And the material that the jar is made out of will change the way the tea changes in the material. So you'll hear that people in, Yunnan will store their pu'er in clay jars rather than porcelain jars because it's believed to be able to breathe more. Porcelain is high-fired, so it's basically you can't really It's like a solid wall. But in theory, something like this clay here, especially, you know, like not so fired clay, will tend to have more breathability, quote unquote. I have never tested out just clay, actually. I do have this guy, which is a more kind of standard unglazed clay. And I've had the tea inside of it for about a year now. This is Jade Mountain as well. I put this in here last year in prep for the Tea Masters Cup competition. And I just like the way this tea performed in the porcelain versus the clay. So that's why I just never tried it again. But I need to try that. Okay. Liar. Finally, some experiments going on. All right. We will leave these to soak indefinitely. That's the beauty of bowl brewing, is that the tea will just sit there and develop slowly over time in the bowls without you needing to decant it. So that's why I really love side-by-sides with the bowl brew method, because you're not really changing very many factors. Even the way that you pour out a pot will change the way the tea tastes. So if you're doing a side-by-side with the Gaiwan and you're doing like the double Gaiwan thing, which I like to do, but if you're right-handed, the way that you pour out will be slightly different from your left hand, you know? And even the angle, if this one's going this way, this one's going this way, will slightly affect the taste of the tea. When you're bowl brewing, the only variable that's going on is the tea leaves. So it just kind of strips everything out. Everything else. Let's see how these guys are going. Just gonna submerge them in the water. They're really fluffy. And yeah, this tea, we really, really like this tea. The first time we opened the bag, I felt like it reminded me of being in Taiwan. It has a kind of like Taiwanese storage smell, you know? I know that it's been to America, has lived here for a little bit, but there's a kind of classic like Taiwanese smell to it that I really, really like. It tastes like, it smells more than it tastes to me, but it smells like my teacher's warehouse in Taiwan, which is like wet, lush, like rainy day with tea. It's a really, really nice smell. But I was curious to see if that was built into the tea or if it was like an aroma that might go away, which is why I thought to put it in the porcelain jar to see if it might change. Already, the one in the plastic original packaging is darker in color than the porcelain jar stored tea. So for reference, this one here is the one in the original packaging. This one here is the porcelain jar stored. Same tea, 1 gram each, you know, very close to boiling, around 97 degrees Celsius. We can't hit 100 degrees Celsius in Vegas because we're high elevation. We're high elevation tea people. Yeah, so we're more expensive and better, always. But we're in the desert, so that's not really, yeah. We've been really we've been happy at home, you know, during the quarantine, working from home, but we kind of miss green stuff. I kind of miss green stuff. The closest drive to see greenery is well, we have a local mountain here that you can actually go skiing in the winter. But because it's the only mountain here with any kind of greenery, everyone and their mom and dad and their cousin and their step cousin and everyone is there every weekend. And I know it doesn't look like it, but we don't really like people if they're not tea people. So we're like, nah. And after that, there's California. We can drive about 5 hours and get to LA from here. We can drive around 3 hours and get to Utah. Still a lot of desert, and then we can drive 3 or 4 hours, get to Arizona, go to Sedona and stuff, get supercharged with the moon, but besides that, yeah. I really miss Taiwan. Okay, let's try these out. So this first one I'm trying is the tea that's been sitting in the original packaging. I haven't done much to it at all. It's been sitting in the same corner of the tea room, so in theory they're getting the same temperature. I did expose one more, you know, to the light than it had to be, being in that dark corner, so they were pretty much beside each other. Yeah. And then this one on the left, oh, the one on the right is the porcelain jar store. Let me put them in front of you. Put them in front of the bowl so you guys know. Oh my god, they taste so different! It's been 2 months only, but they taste really different. Wow. Okay. So original packaging and porcelain jar. Again, even as we're letting these guys steep, and I'm trying to, if I'm like jostling the leaves, I'm trying to jostle them at the same time, if that makes sense. Because when you do this, you know, you're making the leaves brew. So I'm trying to do that for both whenever I do it. But even then, you know, this guy, the one in the original packaging, has a darker color. The one in the porcelain, which I think is because of the light exposure, it's oxidized just a little bit less. I think you guys can see the color difference pretty clearly. Yeah. More yellow, more light. I'd also say that maybe this one's just a little bit clearer in color, but barely. Barely, barely, barely. Yeah. Alright. But there's a difference already. There's a difference. Okay. Wow, okay, so interesting. My first impression, I need to dig a little bit deeper because they're pretty similar, but there is a distinct difference in terms of the impression. So not just the flavor. If you like pour these teas for me and I did this, like it wasn't a side by side, I'd probably tell you it's just the same tea. But there's like a clarity and fullness and like purity to this one. It's just got more like vibrancy to it. The one stored in the porcelain jar. It almost like opened up a little bit more. There's a little bit more things going on, but there is a tiny bit less flavor, I would say, than the one that's been stored in the original packaging, and that I think we can say safely oxidized just a little bit longer. Had a little bit more breathability too. Yeah, this has a stronger taste to it, which is not what you'd expect. You would think that this tea got quote unquote stale, or you know, might lose flavor just over time in the plastic, but I actually think it tastes stronger than the other one. This tea is hard to explain flavor notes, but if I had to, it's called Sugar White. It's very, very, very sweet. It's got a kind of like cooked, like really, really fresh, very like lightly cooked vegetables kind of taste to it. Fresh, vibrant, but sweet, sweet, sweet. So it's almost like a green tea, but think about the sweetest green tea you ever had, and then add a little bit of toastiness to it, is how this tea is coming up. The closest, more typical white tea I can compare this to, God, what would you compare this to? Maybe like a really, really, really high-grade Chaumet. Like a really, really high-grade Chaumet with not very much oxidation. I think Lion has a note here. Sugar cane, I think, is very, very accurate. That's why it's kind of like sweet, but also vegetal, sweet vegetal. And that flavor, and by flavor I don't mean like aroma or texture, just flavor, is very strong in the original packaging. The batch in the porcelain jar, wow, so this is like sweetened cane juice, and this is like cane juice. That's the difference for me. You want to try some, Stephen?
Mm-hmm.
It's lighter, but it's more pure. I don't know what it is. So I think it comes down to preference. I would say some people think this might be too light. But I personally like it more because it has more like stuff going on. You won't taste it as much though. Here you go, Stephen. Take your medicine. So he's going to try it as well. Yeah, I agree. I thought this was cane juicy, but this is more like pure unsweetened cane juice here. And that's crazy. It's only been about 2 months since we put these into storage here. And I will say that the tea in the original packaging did not lose flavor, okay? It does not taste stale. There's no storage taste. I don't taste like the scent of my house on it. I would say that while I still don't recommend putting in something in like a transparent Ziploc bag because I haven't tested it out enough. The effect of having it in transparent Ziploc is not as much as we would think if the tea is good. And this is something I only figured out because I've seen so many tea masters like store their tea in like a Ziploc bag or plastic bag, and it tastes just fine. Like, I'm not just taking their word for it. I taste the tea and it's okay. So what we're learning here is that it's not just, oh, light is bad, oxygen is good or bad, or plastic is bad, porcelain is good. It's more, there's more factors going on than that. Yeah. Steven, thoughts? Did you get the same as I did?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
It's kind of a crispiness to the
Yeah.
jar one.
Yeah. This one just has more like... Wow, it's so hard. Words are so difficult. Like, this is just more like fluffy. It's got more elegance to it. It's got more finesse. It's like a... It tastes fancier, but it's not necessarily better. This one just has more depth. I would say, like, flavor depth, more warm, more toasty.
It's a bit heavier, right?
Heavier, absolutely heavier. This is more quiet. This is more heavy. Not what I expected, you know? And we can use our experiments with our cups, our teaware in the past to kind of think about what this porcelain is doing to the tea. Not sure what you guys have noticed, but I've noticed that I really, really like porcelain for my tea. Not everyone has the same opinion. And it really depends on what specific cup you have, because even porcelain from different companies will have different formulas. And Shiloh from Nuev Orden even told us that like different kinds of bone china will be fired with different kinds of bone. That's why it's called bone china. I never made the connection. But if something is fired with like cow bone versus, I don't know, fish, do they do fish bone? Fish bone versus whale bone versus shark bone. The flavor that the porcelain produces will be a little bit different because the chemical composition will be different too. So, yeah, it's a lot. But I tend to like porcelain for my teas. It might depend on what kind of porcelain jar you have or whether or not you even like porcelain for cups to see if the porcelain jar will work for you. But we've talked about preference here. Maybe even more important is the fact that there is a change. So you have a capability to change the flavor profile of the tea if you're not happy with it by putting it in the porcelain jar. It's really interesting that, you know, as you think about the way you design your tea session, what kind of experience you want to put out to people. If I'm with people who are having like a heavy lunch, or I know they don't taste things as much because maybe they smoke or they, you know, I don't know, they're more flavor forward. Like they like things with much heavier flavors. I can decide to keep the tea in its original packaging like this to try to bring out more of that original flavor, of that deep kind of toasty, more obvious flavor. But if I'm with someone who's like, oh, I love the aftertaste of tea, I love mouthfeel and stuff, I'm like, okay, let me break out the porcelain jar and transform the tea. Yes, it's been 2 months since I put the tea into the porcelain jar, but for the competition last year, I rested the tea for just a week and a half, and there's a big difference between the two. So if you just plan a little bit ahead, I've even seen and heard people say that even just a couple hours resting in a porcelain jar will make a difference. I've certainly done that before. I haven't done a side-by-side of just a few hours. Might be a good next thing to do. Does letting the tea go into a jar for just a couple hours or even a day change the profile enough that it makes a difference? Those of you who like to buy pu'er, you might have heard that, oh, you know, a cake when it arrives to you will need a couple days, maybe a couple weeks to breathe when it arrives in your location. Same concept. We're talking about the same thing. We're giving the tea some space to breathe, to do its thing, to change. But what if you kept the pu'er in like a Ziploc, completely sealed off bag versus letting it sit in like the environment to kind of like breathe and kind of take in what's going on in the surroundings? I'm sure it's going to taste different. Yeah. Very, very interesting. I'd say this is a little tiny bit more dry. for those of you who like aged white tea, this has got more of that kind of like aged white tea vibe to it, I would say. While this one has a more fresh, kind of like vibrant, a little bit creamy thing going on. They both taste like sugar, but this is more like brown sugar. No, like just darker cane sugar, okay? Like less refined sugar. We're like, I'm not, yeah. Tasting notes that specific are not my jam. Yeah. If someone's like, oh, this one's more like refined sugar, this is twice refined sugar, I'm like, I have never tasted twice refined sugar, so I don't know the difference. Just this one's darker, this one's lighter. Yeah. Is it what I expected? No. So when you do these kinds of experiments, not only do I want you to try to do them, but I also want you to try to think at the very beginning, before you test the results, what do I expect from what happens? And I'm going to say that I did not expect this. I actually expected this tea to be more obviously sweet, more obviously aromatic, because that's what it does to my oolong, okay? When I put a High Mountain oolong in it, I've had people smell it. It's like, oh my god, it tastes like candy. It's like so creamy and like so sweet. You just smelled it, right, Stephen? Taiwanese High Mountain in this porcelain jar becomes so lush and full, and it really lets the tea open up a little bit. But with the white tea, it's almost made it, I guess preserve some of that lightness, that vibrancy. The question also is, did it change in the porcelain jar, or did it just change more in the original packaging and the porcelain jar prevented it from changing? I will say, based on what we tasted at the very beginning, we did taste this tea before we split them up. The porcelain jar took off some of that wet aroma that we smelled, Stephen, right? That kind of like Taiwan taste, which I'm kind of sad it's not there anywhere. It doesn't have that like wet aroma that we had. So it did something. It absolutely did something. It kind of smoothed the tea out a little bit, though. It's a little more stable now. There's a little bit of a sour note at the very beginning that I think got taken away, just kind of shaved off. Which is crazy, because we think that when we receive our teas, they're kind of done, they're ready to go, just brew them, they're done. But there's so many things you can manipulate to even push a tea further to fit what you want to happen in the cup. And now I'm like, man, we do cups side by sides, teapot side by sides, the storage side by sides now too. Even the same type of storage will affect two different kinds of tea differently. Another one for the experiment docket, I guess. Is there one you like more than the other, Stephen?
Probably the jar.
The jar? Why?
It's a little more elegant, I guess.
Elegant.
Yeah.
This is so flavorful, though. It's crazy how flavorful this is. Yeah. Joe says, getting heavy cinnamon or allspice notes, smelling the leaves in the Yixing on first steep now. Joe says that he's brewing this tea, which he knows really, really well, in a Yixing for the first time. And I would really recommend that everyone gets at least a couple of teas that they know super well, so that when you put it somewhere else, if you put it in a jar, if you put it here, etc., you'll know how it changes. A weakness of my experiment here is that I use a tea I'm not very familiar with, which is fun, it's really exciting. But I don't know the tea well enough to figure out what exactly the porcelain jar did to it versus the oolong that I put in like last year. I know that tea so well that every single detail of what changed was very obvious to me. Now I'm just like, this is great. I don't know how you changed, but you did.
We just know we're different from each other.
Yeah. Now, after this, we're actually going to hop in with the Myler bag one. This is very, very typical storage for most of us, I would say. The reason why I didn't do a first side-by-side here is because these two came from the same batch, lived in the same USPS box, spent the same amount of time with Joe, with Leafy Green, with me, and then we split them up, right? And why that's a big deal is, even if these are both the same harvest, because they're the same harvest, Joe sent us another bag afterwards, which, number one, tells you how much he really likes this tea. And number two, because it took a different route to get here, just imagine it. You know, if this was sent in like March, it's a different kind of weather, different kind of, you know, it spent more time with us during the last couple of months. This one spent a little bit of time with Joe. It was sent during, you know, June. It's really, really hot. It had more time spent in a hot truck in 100-degree weather, or 40-degree weather for y'all Celsius people, 40-ish degree weather. So even if they're the same batch, I'm going to expect that the tea will taste different, and that's why I didn't put them in a side-by-side here. But now we'll make this experiment kind of branch out. Will these two, which are in theory the same harvest day, same processing, same maker, it's the same batch of tea, will these taste different from this one because they took a different route to get here? Weather, the handling, microclimate, microbiome. Microbiome's a big thing with tea. Why I chose a white tea for this experiment too is because white tea is not fully fixed. You know, they don't fully apply heat to it. It doesn't always completely kill all the microbes that live on the surface of the tea leaves, okay? Just think about it. If white tea had all the enzymes stopped, it would kind of be like green tea when it changes color. Green tea, when it gets old, it doesn't really lose color a lot. Like it does turn a little bit more gray, it turns more brown, but white tea ages a lot faster than green tea. It changes color a lot faster. Within the first 1, 2, 3 years, a white tea will turn from like bright green, olive green to like really, really dark, right? Think about green tea. Green tea at the same age will take more than 3 years to get that really, really dark brown color. Therefore, white tea just has less like heat applied to it and more of that kind of like microbiome action going on from the very beginning too. This doesn't always apply for all white teas, but if you've had an aged white tea, smell it. It might have a fermenty flavor that's almost like a heichao or pu'er. And the reason why is because white tea compared to green tea, oolong, even black tea, I think, don't quote me on this, but in my opinion, and we need to test this out more, it has more capability to have like an active microbiome, microorganisms living on it, just like a pu'er. So, you know, this guy, I don't know, we'll name this batch Jane. Batch Jane went over here. She traveled over here. Wow, we live in Ree's house now. Wow. So Jane's been living with us since March. I don't know why I have to name the batches. Batch A. To anthropomorphize the leaves. Batch B lived in Joe's place a little bit longer. So Joe has a different microbiome in his house, you know, based on what he eats, what he drinks, the other teas that live in his house too. Joe has a lot more pu'er than we have sitting out, I think. Just Joe's a different person. To learn more about this, I really, really recommend picking up the book, We Are Multitudes, I think it is. We Contain Multitudes. There we go. We Contain Multitudes. I'm gonna link it on the Discord. It's a really, really, really interesting book about how much we're affected by the microorganisms around us. In the book it says, if you move into a new house or a new apartment, it only takes 48 hours for the entire composition of the house's microbiome to change because you live there. Isn't that creepy? 48 hours. So everyone you shake hands with, everything that lives in your house, if you have a dog or cat, dog owners and cat owners are supposed to have more diverse microbiomes because their pets bring in stuff from the outside. Joe goes to the ocean, comes back home. You're in the Atlantic, Joe. You're in the East Coast, Joe. The microbiome of your house, and thus the tea storage of your house, will be completely different from mine, you know? And, you know, we're in the desert, our humidity is low, we have different organisms that live here. Those things will change the way our tea tastes. And it's a little creepy, but it's also really cool. That's why even if you have Hong Kong stored pu'er, Kunming stored pu'er, Guangzhou, Malaysian, Taiwanese stored pu'er, yes, there is a accepted kind of standard storage from that area, but it really depends on whose house you're talking about. Which time of year, whose house, who was living there at the time. Meaning if you have a friend over for a couple nights, that person will change the composition of your house's like microbiome just by living at your house for a couple days. So, yeah. It's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. So I highly recommend that book. It's called We Contain Multitudes. It really changed and informed a lot of how I think about tea storage, because we kind of think about humidity and temperature and maybe material as the big three. Humidity, material, and temperature as the big three. But there's also just the living component of the tea, which is really, really cool. Anyway, let's do this side by side. So batch Jane and batch Joe, because it's Joe. Joe's gonna hate us. What I will do, actually, I'm gonna combine these two, because I don't have another identical bowl like this. Let's combine these two. Is that okay? You guys cool with this? One last drink to see how these changed. As your bowl brewing, the tea will change over time, so keep drinking at it. Anything change? Just a tiny bit dry finish, but still deep, very flavorful. Again, this is the original packaging. Our last taste of it before we combine the two. And this is the porcelain. Less flavorful, but more kind of textural, more aftertaste. I think smoother, sweeter. Just quote unquote more pure, but also a little bit less bland. Oh, more bland, I mean. Yeah, okay. So we'll combine these two to give us our kind of like snapshot of the tea that was living at Rhee's house. And then we'll compare it with the sugar white that was also, you know, stored differently, but also kind of like took a different route to get here, if that makes sense. In theory, they should taste the same, right? Because, you know, yes, they were stored differently, but they're the same batch of tea. How different can one batch of tea be? That's what we're going to test right now. Okie dokie. You know, it's not a perfect test, but you can always improve on the experiment. Just build, you know? Don't wait until the perfect opportunity to do an experiment. You can do it whenever, even if it's not perfect. As long as you're aware of what's not perfect, you can just change it next time. Yeah, no big dizzle. It smells different already! So again, this is the batch that Joe just sent us. It's a 3-month difference, I would say. Is that right, Joe? I think you sent this to us maybe 3 months ago? You know, 2 or 3 months ago? So this tea has been living with Joe a little bit longer, and also has been living with Leafy Green a little bit longer. Because Joe, I think you bought this as a separate batch from Leafy Green. It's the same batch though. It's the same harvest, same guy. It just took a different journey to get here. Smells different, yeah? Yeah. Alright, any questions, concerns? Feeling creeped out by the fact that you can change your microbiome by bringing someone over. Gross! Make sure to pick your dates right, okay? You gotta ask them, so how's your gut microbiome? How is your gut flora? Do you take probiotics? Oh, yeah, the book even says if you live with a person who tends to eat, let's say, tacos, there's a possibility that your gut microbiome just makes you want to eat more tacos. So their microbiome will affect yours, and then you'll be more likely to eat tacos. Something like that. You know, just... Yeah. Very, very, very complex. It's crazy, this new form of science. These, like the you know, even just the way that we... Okay, I'm going to weigh this out at 2 grams. This is 2 grams combined. The way that we think, feel, the diseases that we contract, so affected by like these little tiny microorganisms. It's really creepy. Yeah. Little cat bird, welcome to today's tea practice. Delphine, nice to see you. Tea Insights. Heidi, nice to see you. Eric's here too. Nazanin is Podnebeznosh. Jake, nice to see you. Nice to see you guys. Space between black and white as well. Yeah, and then Steven dropped the name of the book, We Contain Multitudes. Is it really by Sarah Henstra? Mm-hmm. Wow. I thought it was a dude because I listened to the audiobook. Oops. Sorry. Very, very good book though. And none of it is tea related, but it will help you understand a little bit more about why tea storage is so diverse.
Oh, I'm probably looking at the wrong book.
Is it
It
the
looks like a fiction, like a novel or something.
Are you sure? Okay, I think it was a dude who wrote it. I'm not sure, but yeah, hold up the little cat bird.
Yeah, that's the wrong book.
It's the wrong book? Okay. Steven, you have one job. It's okay.
Maybe you have the name wrong.
I think it's We Contain Multitudes. Just say microbiome book.
I contain multitudes.
Oh, okay. I contain multitudes. Not we. I contain multitudes. Okay, cool. There we go.
Oh my gosh.
Don't read that book. I'm not sure if it's like a creepy We Contain Multitudes. It's like the lady falls in love with all the aliens that live inside her. Oh god. I contain multitudes. Alright. I was trying to offset my responsibility for my little gut microbiome friends by saying that we all have them, but I contain multitudes. That's the microbiome book. Really, really interesting research. So much interesting stuff. Yeah, I really recommend it for anyone who has any interest at all in tea storage. If you're curious, like why tea changes so much from season to season. If you're into things like Hong Kong versus Malaysian storage, any of those things, really recommend this book. I don't think we should limit ourselves to just reading tea books, because there's so many other things outside the tea community that we might not be accessing yet, and it takes just one or two people to remind us, like, hey, by the way, this is a thing, and you're like, wow. And I actually read that book or listened to it on a 9-hour drive to UC Davis last year, and the topic of that convention that they call a symposium up in UC Davis, where they're trying to make a program for people to study tea at the undergraduate, graduate, and postgraduate level, which is really cool. It's called the Global Tea Institute. But there was one professor who's actually a UC Davis professor who studies microbiomes in the human gut. And she really likes heicha. Isn't that really funny? She really likes heicha. And so she talked about how, there are certain microorganisms present in heicha and how it might affect the human gut. I actually have a blog post about this on the site that talks about the major takeaways from Dr. Yvonne Wan, is her name, Dr. Yvonne Wan. And the teas that we drink actually will affect our microbiome. They did like a study of they sampled what microorganisms tended to go up in number if we drank tea, and which ones went down in number when we drank tea. It's really, really interesting. I think it's a more accurate way of talking about health, because you can actually measure it, and it actually does allow us to talk about health and tea, which is such a taboo topic. But if it changes the way that our gut compositions, turn out, then certainly tea is doing something to us, right? Yeah, but anyway, all that to say, these two teas have been living in different worlds, even if they are the same tea. Yeah. Little catbird, I wonder what she thinks about pu'er. Yeah, I'd love to talk to Dr. Wan. She was really, really hilarious. Whatever tea she's drinking is making her gut microbiome very happy, because she's very happy. Really fascinating stuff. Really fascinating. It would be the same kind of concept with pu'er, though. We like to talk about specific yeasts in Yunnan that affect the pu'er, but once the pu'er leaves Yunnan, the people who handle it, the place it lives, that will change the storage for sure. Yeah. Isn't it interesting how how complicated tea is? And also, you stare into the face of the void, you're like, wow, wonder how many lifetimes it'll take. This motherfucker tastes different. That's crazy. Oh my god. This is supposed to be the same tea, same company, same batch, same harvest. Wow. Yeah, it's different. That is insane. That's really different. Joe, you're sure this is the same batch? I know I asked you earlier, but it's just so different that I'm like, holy crap, it's very different. Wow, that's very different. And this is the batch that Joe sent us 2 or 3 months after the initial batch. And yes, it was stored a different way, but combining both storage and the fact that it lived in different places and underwent different mailing processes, you know, yeah, it's totally different. So if you're wondering, like, oh, how come my tea that I like, you know, it's changed, or am I not brewing it correctly? What's wrong with it? Am I doing something wrong? Or did the vendor change their batch? It might just be a storage or handling issue, you know? We have to be aware of these factors for sure. And yes, I know it's complicated. It'd be easier if I just said, here's the easy answer for all of this, but, you know, yeah, it's, I think it's better if we're aware of these different factors for sure. Lion says, name change, tea curious to tea complicated. Well, that's why it's called tea curious, because if you're not curious, you're not going to dig deep enough to the complicated. I think it's fun. It's really, really fun. What we can do, you know, eventually is we should get an order at the same time of a certain tea and then split it up from one person and send it out to everyone. And then when we know we're going to come together, we'll all bring the teas that we stored in a Mylar Ziploc bag, or maybe in like a porcelain jar, so that, because these guys don't let as much air in, the porcelain jar is not completely sealed, so it has a little bit of air to kind of go in and out. And whatever air is trapped in there is the air that is in your surrounding environment, right? So even if it's a Mylar Ziploc bag, the moment you open up that bad boy and you're like, ooh, new tea! Smells good. Close it up. It's changed already. So that's what we should do, I think, tea curious friends. Let's get a batch of tea. One of us at least knows really, really well. Send it out to a bunch of people. Say that we had to seal it, like, you know, maybe... I'd even say keep it in the Mylar bag, but open the bag up for a couple of days, right? And then we'll say, okay, day 5, everyone close your bags now. Close it. That's more than enough time for the microbiome to change a little bit. Then we want to see if it changes after like 3-6 months, maybe a year. If we can just get together in person and try it. That'd be super dope. That'd be really interesting, you know? And of course, it will be affected by, you know, how much of an asshole your mailman is, you know, if the AC was broken on the USPS truck that day. But mostly microbiome, yeah. These taste very different. They do taste like the same tea, don't get me wrong, but I'd say this is less sweet. This is less, this is more vegetal, more like the sugar, the cane part of the sugar cane. Like the vegetable part, this is more sweet here. Wow. And it has a wet storage aroma it had before. That's really interesting. What? Joe says, 90% sure, but it was a restock for me, so it was with leafy green longer. There you go. So, this tea lived at their facility just a little bit longer than this here. Antilopian, tasting oolongs, he says. Yeah, we're tasting a Taiwanese white, as Joe says, called Sugar White. It's a white tea from the Dongting area. Cultivar is Wanzi. You can just think about it. It's not exactly the same, but it's like Qingxin oolong. Very similar to what you'd find from any high mountain oolong in Taiwan. Unless it has like a different, like if it's Jinshuan different, but by standard, this is kind of like very classic cultivar in Taiwan. So, yeah. The little catbird says, jokes on the mailman, the trucks don't have AC. So there you go. I'm not a mail person. That was very obvious. Yeah, and it sucks. People here, like, it's really hot right now in Vegas. So I think by the time this tea was sent to us, Joe, we'd already hit like 100 degrees. Yeah, so I'm sure this tea has seen 100-degree weather. And we're trying to figure out if the same batch of tea has changed based on storage and also where it's lived at any given time. And this is why also I'm not the biggest fan of extremely specific tasting notes. Because the moment you take one tea from one place to another, if something is like roasted peach, if you take it somewhere else, once you add in like different material, different brewing style, different person, all the storage situation, that roasted peach could become like apricot or whatever. It's just stone fruit or just fruity, you know? I really don't buy that you can always get the exact same flavor note across the same tea, even if you brew it the same way, because your water will change, tea ware will change, etc. I do see the sugarcane note here, but is it what I first thought of? I wouldn't think so. I actually wouldn't think so. Yeah, that's a much more vegetal. Wow, that's interesting. And this is towards the very beginning of the steeps, but I remember how this tea tasted in the very beginning too. Wow, that's so sweet. Steven, get a hold of this. This is so much sweeter. What the hell? What's going on? So here's the tea that's been living with us for a couple months longer. Combination of the two. Okay. And then, so you got that. Actually, that's a very good, I like that better than the two of them separately, unfortunately.
It's twice the leaf, right?
It is twice the
In the
leaf,
bowl,
yes,
so.
yes. Antilopian, interesting. How'd you compare it to Yinzhen from Yunnan? Yeah, really different, extremely different. It's a different leaf material, so you guys might have noticed this is a white tea, but it's mostly leaves. And that's because the Taiwanese tea plants, most of them don't have really fuzzy buds. They're smaller leaf material and smaller buds. And if you wanted to get like a silver needle style tea from Taiwan, it would take a fuck ton of effort. Just like tiny buds, pick, 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 pick. That's why when you open up a Taiwanese oolong, you're not going to see like a fat bud, like a silver needle or Yinzhen at all. Very different. The only thing that they have in common, maybe, is it's got kind of like just a tiny bit of maltiness. Just a tiny bit. Which is, I think, a tiny bit of oxidation that white tea gets. Yeah. And in all of this, I think one last thing. White tea, it's only just been a couple years since white tea has been seen as like an ageable tea. For a while there, everyone was like, oh, white tea, just, a couple years at the best, make sure to drink it ASAP. Stale white tea, throw it out. But we do know now that white tea can age, but even more than that, it's not just like it's oxidizing over time. If the white tea didn't undergo a lot of like heat and temperature applied to it at the very beginning of its life, it might still have some of those microorganisms that were living on the tea farm where it came from by the time it gets to you. I can't confirm that. I'd never taken it to a lab, but what taught me this is the Wild Mountain White that we have, which is a tea from a abandoned tea farm. It's these kinds of leaves too, like lower on the bush. And when you taste that tea, I've had people, I've blind tasted that tea to people. It's a 2012 white tea. And some people are like, is that heicha? I'm like, really? It's heicha? I think it's heicha. And they're right. They're not, it's not that these people don't have good taste. They know what a heicha is. They know what a white tea is. It's that the tea is so fermenty and interesting. There's just so much vibrancy to it that it tastes like a heicha. And I think it's because whatever's living on there from the first time it was picked is still living on there, or like it just continued on, And that tea I've taken to Taiwan and then taken back here, and it's like a living, breathing tea. The tea will change flavor based on where I'm living. The smell will change. The taste will change so much that it's important to remember our teas are not finished yet when they get to us. They still will change. They'll transform. They're living, breathing. Yes, they're dead leaves, but they're not done yet. The transformations are not done yet, which is, I think, really interesting. Puts more power in our hands, So any questions about that, let me know. I know we covered a lot of ground today. Thanks for being patient. So many different factors. But I'd be lying to you if there weren't so many different factors, right? There's so many. Yeah, anyone down for that experiment? We'll split up a batch of one tea, send it out to a bunch of people, agree to meet in St. Louis in 3 years, and then taste them all at the same time, same batch, different living conditions. Would be really interesting. Yeah. So let us know if you have any questions, ideas about this, your own experiments, let us know. Especially on the Discord, which of course is really well set up for talking about this stuff. You guys know that. Tomorrow we have another experiment. I hope you guys join us for it, because you don't have to rest a tea for a week. 2 weeks, 3 months. We will be testing out white tea with 2 different temperatures, boiling, and about 185 Fahrenheit, 85 Celsius, just to see how the difference is, you know? Yeah. So let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a nice day. Goodbye.